$66 million. That's how much Tse Chi Lop reportedly lost in a single night at a baccarat table in Macau. According to Australian federal police, he just kept playing and playing and playing. No one at that table knew his name. No one in that casino knew what he did for a living. And no one had any idea they were watching the biggest drug lord in modern-day history. And he just burned $66 million, like it was nothing. For nearly 2 decades, law enforcement agencies across the world chased a ghost. They knew someone was flooding Asia and the Pacific with methamphetamine on a scale never seen before. And they knew the operation was earning somewhere between $8 and $17 billion a year. They had a nickname, Sam Gor, or also known as Brother Number 3. But they had no face, no photograph, and no starting point. The United Nations called him as significant as El Chapo or Pablo Escobar. But unlike those men, nobody knew what Sam Gor looked like. Nobody knew his real name. His name was Tse Chi Lop, and this is how he built his empire in the dark. Tse Chi Lop was born in 1963 in Guangzhou, China, during one of the most violent periods in the country's history. Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution had turned the nation inside out. Young men were recruited into paramilitary groups called the Red Guards, enforcers of Mao's ideology. But when the Red Guards became too powerful, Mao turned on them and threw thousands of them into labor camps. Those camps were marked on Chinese military maps with big red circles, and the prisoners inside them became known as the Big Circle Boys. When they got out, they didn't go home. They went to Hong Kong, and they brought their violence, their discipline, and their hunger with them. The Big Circle Boys became one of the most feared triads in Asia. Armed robberies, kidnappings, and heroin trafficking. Tse Chi Lop joined them young. By the mid-1980s, Hong Kong was getting too hot, so in 1988, at the age of 25, Tse did what many Big Circle Boys were doing. He moved to Canada. Toronto in the late 80s was a landing pad for triads looking to expand. The Big Circle Boys were already running heroin, armed robberies, and kidnapping rackets through the city's Chinatown. But Tse Chi Lop wasn't interested in street crime. He wanted money, big money. So he did something that no triad member had done before. He reached across the underworld and made a deal with the Italian mafia. According to court records and law enforcement documents, Tse negotiated a partnership with the Toronto branch of the Montreal-based Rizzuto crime family. They were the most powerful mafia family in Canada at the time. The arrangement was elegant. Tse's Big Circle Boys would source high-purity, low-cost heroin from the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia, and the Rizzutos would distribute it through the American Mafia's networks across the United States and into Italy. East met West. The heroin flowed. And between 1990 and 1992, the price of heroin in Toronto dropped by more than 40%. Tse Chi Lop was still in his 20s. On August 12, 1998, Tse Chi Lop was arrested in New York as part of a massive heroin trafficking network. FBI Special Agent Mark Kalnin later told CNN that Tse was calm, friendly, and strategically tight-lipped. In court, Tse put on a dramatic performance. He expressed great remorse to the judge and said he wanted to open a restaurant to take care of his sick parents and his child who was born with breathing problems. Prosecutors didn't believe a word of it, but the performance worked. His co-conspirator received 27 years, while Tse Chi Lop received 9. He served his sentence at a low-security federal prison in Elkton, Ohio, where inmates described him as easygoing and well-liked. But Tse wasn't resting. According to investigators, he spent his years in prison networking and building relationships with drug traffickers from across Asia. One of those connections was a Hong Kong trafficker named Lee Chung-chak, who was serving time for the same operation. When both men walked out of prison in 2006, they had a plan. Tse was deported to Canada, but he didn't stay. By 2011, he had relocated to Hong Kong, and from there, he built something the drug world had never seen before. What Tse built was not a gang. It was a corporation, and law enforcement called it the company. He united 5 of Asia's most powerful triads, groups that had spent the 1990s trying to destroy each other. The 14K, the Wo Shing Wo, the Sun Yian, his own Big Circle Boys, and Taiwan's Bamboo Union. 5 armies, under one CEO. But Tse didn't stop there. He recruited the Yakuza in Japan, motorcycle clubs in Australia, the Lebanese mafia, and much more. He built a distribution network that stretched from the jungles of Myanmar, to the streets of Melbourne, to the ports of Tokyo. Tse pivoted from heroin to methamphetamine, and he didn't just sell meth. He revolutionized how it was made, moved, and sold. In the lawless Shan state of Myanmar, protected by armed militias, Sam Gor built industrial-scale superlabs deep in the jungle. And then came the guarantee. If a shipment was seized by police, the company would replace it, free of charge. No criminal organization on Earth could say no to that kind of deal. By 2018, Sam Gor controlled between 40 and 70% of the entire Asia-Pacific drug market. 70% of the meth entering Australia came from the company. The United Nations estimated Tse's annual revenue at up to $17.7 billion. That's 17 times what El Chapo's cartel earned at its peak. November 15th, 2016. A young Taiwanese man named Kai Zheng walked through Yangon International Airport in Myanmar, carrying a Jimmy Choo leather bag and 2 mobile phones. Security noticed him picking at his hands, and his fingers were red and blistered, a telltale sign of handling methamphetamine, which is toxic to human skin. They searched him, and taped to each of his thighs was a bag of ketamine, but the drugs on his body was irrelevant. It was the 2 phones he had that changed everything. An Australian federal police investigator stationed in Myanmar began scrolling through the photos and messages on Kai's devices. The phones contained thousands of messages about meth shipments, photos of past drug seizures in China, Japan, and New Zealand, and a video of a man being tortured for losing 300 kilograms of product. And then, in the photo gallery, the investigator saw a face he recognized from an intelligence briefing a year earlier. It was Tse Chi Lop. That discovery launched Operation Kungur, the largest international investigation ever conducted against an Asian drug syndicate. 20 agencies from a dozen countries spent years doing surveillance, phone intercepts, and billion-dollar drug seizures. In October 2019, Reuters published the first public expose naming Tse Chi Lop. The ghost finally had a face. On January 22, 2021, Tse Chi Lop boarded a flight in Taiwan bound for Canada. The plane stopped at Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, and he never made his connection. Dutch police, acting on an Australian federal police warrant, arrested him in the terminal. He was 57 years old, and he was, according to the United Nations, in the same league as Pablo Escobar. The ghost who had operated in the shadows for 2 decades walked into the fluorescent light of an airport terminal and disappeared into custody. He fought extradition for nearly 2 years before being sent to Australia in December 2022. On December 4th, 2025, Tse Chi Lop pleaded guilty to conspiracy to traffic commercial quantities of methamphetamine, and he was sentenced to 16 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2031. In 2023, 2 years after Tse's arrest, a record 190 tons of methamphetamine was seized across Southeast Asia, the highest amount ever recorded. The superlabs in Myanmar, the distribution chains across 12 countries, and the money laundering through casinos and real estate. All of it is still running. The demand has been built, and someone has already stepped in his place. Tse Chi Lop is in a prison cell in Melbourne, but the company doesn't need him anymore. The ghost is gone, but the machine keeps running. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel so you never miss the next story.